So I thought of this video idea and I was debating on doing it or not because a part of me was like, Ariana, who does this really benefit? Like, people don't care. And then I started looking at it as more of a recommendations video because I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, well, if it weren't for these classes that I've taken, I probably wouldn't have read these specific stories anytime soon. Take this as kind of a recommendations video. I want to talk about my favorite reading assignments since starting my college career. These things that I'm mentioning, I would genuinely sit down and reread them in my free time. They're that good. I'm going to go in order of when I read them. I'm going to start with my intro class. I think I'm going to end with my advanced fiction class for the sole purpose that yes, that is my favorite thing that I have read so far in any of my workshops. The first one is actually a short story. Down, it's because I have titles and author names written down in a notebook for me. First short story I read in my intro to creative writing class, X and O by Jewel Mogan. I love this short story. This might be my favorite short story of all time. X and O is from the point of view of a teenage girl who has recently gotten pregnant. I think she's 15 if I'm remembering correctly. I've read this short story multiple times, like even outside of class. Like, I made my boyfriend read it. Please read it. I believe it's part of a bigger collection written by Jewel Mogan. What makes this so great is the way it's written, the writing style. The voice is so conversational that it literally feels like you are sitting down with a teenage girl and she's telling you this story. It's heartbreaking and it's great. It blew my mind the first time I read it. A lot of people also, might not like it because the writing style is so casual and so unlike how we're told to write, and I think that's why it's such a good short story to teach in intro class. You know, it really opened my eyes to you can write however you want. Like, if it works, it works, and this worked. I can't say it enough. I love this short story. Then we go into my creative nonfiction class. This is actually a piece from House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. I think that's how you say her last name. I'm sorry. I'm so bad with names. This is the intro to that book. I actually haven't read House on Mango Street, which I know I have to. The intro to House on Mango Street is a personal story, and it's all about her in her days of being an emerging writer, isolating herself in her first ever own home, her home away from home. The piece is titled A House of My Own. It made me cry. Like, it really made me cry. So relatable to me, and it was so well written and just tugged at my emotions. She has a way with words that makes you feel like you are really getting an inside look at her life. I highly recommend, if you don't want to read A House on Mango Street, go into the bookstore, pick it up, and at least read the intro. I want to talk about my reading as writers class. We read this novel called Innocence and Others by Dana Spiotta. I really liked it. I looked forward to reading it. I read the whole thing. I really liked how this book went back and forth between characters, intertwined them. It was told in third person. Felt like the characters still had very distinct voices. We talked about in class how the formatting was really interesting. There was lots of lists and at one point comment section because I don't want to spoil it. Oh, I forgot to say what it's about. The main character is this woman named Meadow, and we first see her as a teenager, and she's an aspiring filmmaker and later on goes to be a very famous filmmaker. There's lots of facts about film and the filmmaking process, but it's not done in a stale way at all. Like, it's done in a very interesting, organic way where it's like, the only reason I am being told this is because the character would think about this right now, and the character is doing this, and it's not just like an info dump of like, this is how films are made. It's like, yeah, Ariana, that's just called good writing, like, good job. But I do recommend looking into this, especially if you're into filmmaking or just if you like when authors go in detail with like jobs. If you value text being like factually correct and the author clearly knowing what they're talking about. Like, this is a great example of that. Next we're gonna go into playwriting, and I had a lot more plays to mention than I thought I would. I never thought I would like reading plays. I have 3 here that I really enjoyed. Going to go in order for this subcategory just because I do know the order. I'm gonna go from the one I liked the least to the one I like the most. This first one is Gloria by Brandon Jacobs Jenkins, about a group of people who work at a publishing office, and then that's all I'm gonna tell you because I don't want to spoil anything, but things take a turn. It's funny, it's thought-provoking, very relevant to today. It says it's a finalist for the 2016 Pulitzer Prize. It's so short. You could fly through this. I remember when we all came to class after having read this with like our mouths open. Like, the next play I want to mention is Mr. Burns by Anne Washburn. This is a play that uses Simpsons, like The Simpsons, like yes, exactly what you're thinking of. This is The Simpsons as a cultural symbol, if you will, in a post-apocalyptic world. Yes, just take that in. It's quite strange. It is quite strange. You have people in this play putting on a production in which they are Simpson characters and they are reenacting episodes that they remember, and you kind of get to see how The Simpsons evolves after the apocalypse and how people use it to cope with what has happened to the world. And the reason my teacher assigned this play was to teach us a bit about subtext, the use of subtext in plays, but I think that very well can transfer into other writing, and I know that because it did. I found myself thinking more about subtext in my prose, and it's funny, it's very entertaining. I don't really watch The Simpsons. I mean, if it, every time I do see it, I enjoy it, but it does not take a giant Simpsons fan to, one, understand The Simpsons, because they're, I highly recommend it. I'm definitely going to check out the other plays in this bind-up. My favorite play that we read this semester was John by Annie Baker. So this play revolves a couple who stays at this bed and breakfast as they try to repair their relationship. Annie Baker just does a really great job at playing with relationship dynamic. You don't know whose side you're on I don't know. It's very interesting. It's just, if you want a good portrayal of a relationship that, again, makes you think, lots of good stuff. I don't really know how to talk about it. It also has to do with the owner of the bed and breakfast. I really liked how this was written. I thought it's very contemporary. It's 2016. So this is very contemporary. This is very current, and I really recommend reading plays if you are busy and don't have a lot of time to read, because I would read the play in one day. It helps a lot with the writing dialogue. On to my favorite thing that I have read thus far in any of my workshops. Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. I went out and bought a physical copy of it because I love it so much. It's a short story collection. They're all from the point of view of a drug addict, anonymous narrator, and it's just so good. I think there are 11 short stories in this. I'm not sure. I would have to count, but the imagery in here is insane. And sure, a part of that is because the main character is on drugs a lot of the time, but like the writing is good. I don't know how many times I'm gonna say this, but it was thought-provoking. Janice Johnson does a great job at writing a character who is very morally ambiguous, and you kind of love to hate him a lot of the time, but because the addiction is written so well, you also know that a lot of the stuff he does is done because he's struggling, and he writes so well, and all of the stories are so good. A lot of it is really funny, and if you want to get into short stories, I highly recommend that you pick this collection up because I loved it. So yeah, that is all. Hopefully maybe you found something in these recommendations, something to add to your TBR. A lot of the stuff I mentioned is actually really short. If you have anything you'd like to recommend me, if I mentioned anything and you're like, hey, if you like that, you might like this, like definitely recommend them to me. Tell me what your favorite format to read is, if that makes sense. Like, do you like to read plays? Do you like to read short stories, novels? If you want to follow me on any of my social media, they will all be down below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.